Welcome back. I'm Tedward, and today, thanks to Bond Group in Waltham, Massachusetts, we're driving this 1988 Porsche 911 Carrera, and it is not my Carrera. I do own an 88 Carrera, but this one is bone stock. It's gorgeous. It has a nice light sort of gray interior. Of course, it has a 3.2 liter flat six, mated to a G50 5-speed transaxle, all powering the rear wheels. Now, it's always fun for me to see a really clean, narrow body with no modifications because it's just how they were supposed to be. Now, it's possible that this was supposed to have a flat tail and they added the whale tail. Not super positive, but otherwise, all around, this is a really clean example of about a 62,000 mile car. And it's cool to drive them when you get to put on nice new normal rubber. The problem with the turbo wheels, the 16-inch Fuchs, I'll get yelled at no matter what I say, it doesn't matter, it's the internet. But anyway, these beautiful wheels are 15 inches, and it's way easier to find tires for the 15-inch wheel than it is for the 16. They're a little narrower and they're a little smaller, which gives you the added benefit of more sidewall. But are you really out there careening down the canyons regularly? You don't need the extra grip. It's fine. This is plenty grippy. And especially in 2024, when you can put on like a Continental Extreme Contact Sport, this is a lot of tire, and it's a lot more tire than I think Porsche ever intended for a car of this vintage to see back in the day. This does have the standard Carrera brakes, no turbo upgrade here, and they work just fine. Now, one of the best things about these cars is just how nice and tight they are. They're beautiful, they're built really strong. They're fairly simple, but maintenance is getting expensive. These cars used to be practically free. I mean, you used to be able to go out and get a 3.2 Carrera or an earlier car with a 915 and a 3-liter. I mean, these were in the teens. Some of these were in the teens. And, you know, people just turned them into track rats. They built them up. They raced them. They were almost not disposable. That's a really condescending term. But people were not shy about really just thrashing these. But the thing is, to find good air cooler mechanics now is just getting more and more difficult. And while these are really stout engines that kind of run forever, they do require valve adjustments, they require top-end rebuilds, and then, you know, around 180 to 200,000 miles-ish, that's when you're going to start thinking about doing a full rebuild. And I have been told, oh, this makes me sick to my stomach, I've been told that a full rebuild on a car like this for an engine can be in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $80,000, depending on what you end up doing. And that is a tough pill to swallow. Except that now, these are not in the teens. These are actually close to sometimes over $100,000 cars. The red Carrera we drove just a few weeks ago sold on Bring a Trailer for $105,000. I mean, that's crazy. There was a little bit of a bubble that burst, but the leveling point of these cars is really healthy. So it makes me think, maybe I do want to sell my car. Maybe my Carrera that I don't drive that often is taking up some space in the collection that could be appreciated more by somebody else. I don't know. But, you know, I certainly wouldn't expect $100,000 for my car. It could definitely go a little cheaper. But, you know, it's nice to see that there's people who really do appreciate them and are going to put the money and time into them that they deserve. All these cars, if you're just looking for some quick facts on these cars, you can always find this little manufacturing plate down here. And in these little holes, they punch out 1187. So the build date of this car was November 1987. My car says 0488. So this is an early 88 build, and it's cool because, you know, my car's got a little cage and Recaro seats, and the Kinder seats are removed. It's all cloth. It's fun to see what these are as like normal cars, because my car is such an RS tribute car that it doesn't make for the best street car, and it's really fun when you get in this thing, and it totally warps my brain because I think, wow, these are actually really, really nice and soft and casual to drive. It's an AC car. I have the hardest time figuring out how all of this nonsense works. We get a little ashtray there, but you know, you've got your defrosters here, you've got some climate controls down here for your air conditioning, and then you've got the direction of travel for the air. There's a lot going on, and I still am no expert, even though I own one of these things. But hey, I love these steering wheels. It's weird when people get in these cars and they say, oh my goodness, what an ugly wheel. I think this is great. These are like some of my favorite steering wheels. No power steering, it's all manual. Key on the left, of course. So let's start it up. Got these wild hinged pedals down here. So let's see, there's our brake, there's our clutch. It's kind of a strange motion. You get used to it after a while. Sorry for the buzzing. But over here, we've got our gauges. Let me get a seatbelt on and I'll show you around. So on the far left, there is a fuel gauge, nothing to write home about. There's an oil gauge. That is actually oil level. We'll get back to that in a second. Then you've got your oil temperature. There's no water. Of course, it's air-cooled. Druck press, that's your oil pressure. Always want to make sure that that's there. If there's none of that, well, just shut her down. Tach front and center. This one is not rotated, nor is the speedometer. 62,000 miles. How cool is that? And a clock. You can always adjust these like so. And this one, the original radio is back at the shop at Bond Group, but they've got this Pioneer upgrade, and always nice to have a little glove box. Okay. This oil level, remember, this is a dry sump oiling system. So you have a tank and the engine is pulling oil from the tank. So as you rev it up, that'll come down because you're pulling oil into the engine. And with higher revs, it's just gonna suck oil out of that tank, run it through the engine, and then on its way back, once we're back at idle, it's just gonna fill that back up. This only works on level ground when it's warm. We're not on level ground, so this is actually probably higher than it actually is. The other thing is that yes, it's air-cooled, but it has oil lines that go up and around, I think, the passenger side of the car to an oil cooler in the front. So there's a thermostat. Once it hits a certain temperature, it'll start circulating oil around to the front of the car to keep it cool. But anyway, enough about that. Let's go out for a cheeky little drive. Oh, I love this sound. There's a little light right here, the arrow. I get that question every single time I drive this car. What is that light popping up on the tach? Well, that is just an upshift arrow. So watch. Once it gets above a certain RPM, it's like, hey, you probably want to upshift to save fuel. Saabs did that. I think some BMWs did that. I don't even remember. But anyway, let's get out on the road. With the AC running, let's get her off the line. Such a joy. The G50 gearbox is preferable to me. I prefer it over the 915 just because of its longevity. It has better synchros. It seems to shift better. And I already can hear well, actually, the 915 is more spiritually close to the racing gearboxes and it's lighter. So, look, I get it. There's people who like the 915s better. I think the shift engagement on a 915 is better. It's a better throw. But I, personally, am more confident with the G50. So it's just my preference. The market seems to agree with me on this, but look, if you prefer a 915, great. That's good. That means you have to spend less money to get what you want. Suspension on these cars stock. Oh, they're really forgiving, man. I forget this because my car is not forgiving. It's very low and it's very stiff. I've got spherical bushings. Sometimes you just need a little reminder of a stock car to go back in time and say, hey, this is what they were. Got a power sunroof, always cool. Because the rear engine, they get this sort of widowmaker reputation. Of course, that's a 930. This is not a 930. 930s were turbo only. And, oh, someone killed a turtle. That makes me a sad guy. This is a G model. And they can still get a little dicey on you. That is a rear engine hanging over the back. So if you mess it up, yeah, you can spin it, but you can spin any car. You just have to understand how to kind of settle the nose on the throttle or on the brakes. the way to drive these cars is in a corner. Throttle is going to cause understeer, and removing or lift off from that throttle is going to cause oversteer. So it's just playing with that balance, and it's not that hard. I think people just get intimidated if they're not familiar with the car, kind of dancing with them a little bit. I'm not saying that you're going to go become some wild track star in your air-cooled 911, but they're not that scary. You just have to respect it and feel it out. Go sit in a rotary in a roundabout for a few minutes and just test it. Get over this bump first. Of this engine, when you really get into it, comes alive over like 4,500 RPM. It's really beautiful. Camera overheated. Always good when your GoPro overheats before your air-cooled 911. But anyway, it loves high revs relative to this engine. Air coolers don't rev that high. That's why Singers cost so much money. I mean, other reasons too. But to get like a 9,000 RPM air cooler, that's when you're, hundreds of thousands of dollars into an engine. Stable out on the highway. Fifth gear, 3,200 RPM. We were driving a 930 turbo the other day, a 4-speed, and that car was only at like 2,500 RPM at about the same speed. So go figure. Really hard to heel toe these cars because of the pedal placement. You've got to be so deep in the brakes to kind of reach safely over to that throttle. So I find myself doing a lot of pedal dancing. Clutch bite point, beautiful, nice weight on that clutch pedal as well. And I've got a turbo clutch in my car, so it's a little more robust, but honestly, it doesn't feel a heck of a lot different. Maybe a little grabbier, but this feels great. This one has cruise control, which my car, I think, originally had cruise control, but it was removed. I've never actually driven one with cruise control before. So this is a little weird. There's a stock behind the windshield wiper stock. Pulled it up to go faster. Pull it forward to cancel. Pretty good. That's funny. These just shine as such good sports cars, and they're pretty expensive now. It's tough to justify that cost sometimes, but if you're looking for a car that you can put some miles on and actually enjoy pretty regularly, it's hard to overlook a 3.2 Carrera with a G50 box, because it really checks a lot of boxes. They're really fun to cane into some corners, but they also just require a little bit of finesse and driver-focused energy into getting them down the street to begin with. They're not hard to drive, but you definitely have a bit of a learning curve. And once you get used to it and connect with it, they're just wonderful. And understand why people like flocked to these cars back in the day. They're raw. You know, it's got no power steering, no ABS. It's a manual gearbox. It's air-cooled. I mean, it's still wild to me that they made air-cooled cars until like 1997, 98. That's bonkers. Oh, big heavy on the steering wheel. Gotta muscle it around for any kind of big corners like that. But it's fun. You feel everything. I mean, you want to talk about granularity through your fingertips. You can feel literally every grain of sand, every imperfection in the road. And that means that you can enjoy the car at relatively low speeds. You don't have to go nuts with it. And here we get to enjoy the beautiful visibility out of this 911. The weirdest yield sign. There you have it, another perfectly good Carrera. You know, they're not rare, but good examples are getting harder to find, and really good examples are really expensive. This is the sweet spot. That's 60 to 100,000 mile car. That's what you want. You want to find a driver that you're not afraid to drive, because if you pay $150,000 for a car because it had 4,000 miles on it, well, I don't care what you say, you're probably going to have a little bit of odometer anxiety. You're not going to want to go out and use it. Whereas a car like this, if you put 10 or 20,000 miles on it, not a bad thing. So, anyway, here's me, big surprise, recommending Porsches. And if you're looking for like a classic that just drives well, is a proper sports car and gives you the fizz, but just isn't all that challenging in terms of living with, this is great. They run, they drive, find a mechanic, keep them up to snuff, change the oil, and you'll be good to go. So thank you to Bond Group, while I avoid some potholes. Thank you to Bond Group for tossing the keys to a very nice example of a 3.2 Carrera. Unfortunately, it makes me think like, man, I want to buy a second one just so I can have a stock suspension. A little tricky. Maybe I got to do some modifications on mine and make it a little less hardcore. Maybe I just got to sell it and buy a different one. I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe it's time to mix it up. Who knows? Thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one.